This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
I think many of us can relate to today's guest. Kerry Tepedino came from a background of low self-esteem and no self-belief. Carrying around an extra 50 pounds didn't help. Kerry's defining moment came when she realized that she could continue to live being unhappy and burned out, or find out what her soul was screaming for. Hi, Kerry.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. We're going to have so much fun, Lucy.
Yeah, and your story, it just sounds so similar to what I went through about 4 years ago. So maybe we could go back to that day when you hit rock bottom. What was going on? What led you to that point?
Yeah, great question. So at the time, I've been in the health and wellness and personal development space about 20 years. I've had this business about 20 years. But before that, I was working in the corporate world and I was a graphic designer and I had this deadline at work and I was so stressed about it, right? I was stressed that I wasn't going to deliver a great product and my boss would be upset or my peers would be upset. I was stressed about it. And I remember it was due the next day and I was driving home from work and I remember my hands on my driving wheel as I'm driving home on the freeway. I totally remember. And I'm telling myself, don't stop at the store, Kerry. Don't stop at the store, Kerry. And the reason I was saying that was because I was an emotional eater. That's the way I checked out, numbed out, and escaped. And the stress triggered me to want to check out. And so, of course, where did I find myself? I get into my neighborhood and I find myself, of course, in front of the store. And as I'm pushing the cart up and down the aisles and filling my basket with all my favorite comfort foods, I'm telling myself, oh, this time it's going to be different. This time this food's going to last 2 weeks and like any normal person, and I'm not going to overeat. And then I check out, I pay for the food. I get home, I'm putting it into my cupboard and I'm just going to have one bite of peanut butter. And I screw off that blue lid and I peel back the silver foil and stick my spoon in, and one bite becomes two bite becomes three. And it wasn't until my spoon hit the bottom of that peanut butter jar that my heart broke again. Because once again, I had broken trust in myself, right? Once again, I had made promises and didn't follow through. And for myself, I wasn't just a binger. I was also a binge and purger at the time. And so then I made the long trek down the hallway. I can even feel my feet, going into the plush carpet down the hall right now as I take myself back there and I try to purge it out and it doesn't work. It wasn't just the peanut butter. Peanut butter was just the beginning of the binge, and try to purge it out, doesn't work. But this time was different because this time my heart was racing. So I found myself curled up on my white tile floor crying because I was scared, because my heart was racing. And I knew because one of my good girlfriends from college, her mom had died of an eating disorder because her organs failed. And so I had a direct experience of what could happen if I kept up this self-abuse. And I knew enough about health to know that my heart racing like that meant that my electrolytes were imbalanced, which was now affecting my cardiovascular system. And I got scared. I got really scared. And it was a wake-up call. That was a defining moment of a wake-up call for me, that not only was I slowly killing myself mentally and emotionally, spiritually even, but I was now having a physical impact, a negative physical impact on myself, because I was allowing myself to stay in this cycle. And I had a choice to make. That was a defining moment. Either keep doing what you're doing, Kerry, and you know where this could probably lead, or pick yourself up and let's do some deep healing work and let's get your life back. And that catapulted me into traveling the world, studying with monks, traveling to India, studying under an Ayurvedic doctor for a month, 12 hours a day for a month straight. And he just downloaded to me about breath work and meditation and Ayurveda, which is, a holistic practice, and came back to this I live in Southern California. I got my licensing for a holistic health practitioner, cranial sacral therapist, so trauma resolution and yoga instructor, all that stuff. And I pieced myself back together. And then it felt like, oh my gosh, I finally cracked the code. And I feel like when you finally crack the code, what happened for me, I should say, is I then wanted to give it away. And like no other woman should be feeling this way if there's a way out. And I feel like I found the way out. And so the business I have today, which, I've been in this industry for around 20 years, this business almost birthed itself because I started teaching yoga, and then I started sharing what I learned, and that led to me opening a massage business and then a cranial practitioner business. And it was just sharing and sharing and sharing. And it just grew and grew and grew until we're now a global business, and we've been online, totally online, I guess, between 8 and 10 years, and service women through transformational group programs and private coaching. And it's amazing. It's amazing what's come out of that darkest chapter.
That is almost like a carbon copy of what I went through.
Wow.
I hit a point in my life where I'm going to say I was probably already dead. You said that you were dying. I think I was somewhat dead inside. And I'm not sure that I ever really allowed myself to be alive. And I hit this moment of desperation. And long story short, I called out to the universe for an answer. And the answer came. And that was the beginning of the 4-year journey that has brought me to here. And it's the very reason why this podcast exists, is because if I can help one person from either climbing out of that bottomless pit or avoiding themselves going into it, then my journey had meaning and purpose, aside from, what I've grown and gained out of it. So it's amazing how many of us go through those dark moments. And I think it was it Napoleon Hill that said, and of the darkest crisis is when you have your shining moments, something along those. I know I butchered that, but something along
I don't know
those
if it was
lines.
him, but out of the darkest moment comes our biggest lessons.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but yeah.
And I agree. I mean, some of those, and you hear it from a lot of people, like they had, a horrible loss of a loved one, or a scary diagnosis themselves, or bankruptcy, or, whatever, a bad divorce, or that broke their hearts, or whatever it is. And then piecing themselves back together, that moment, that lesson, it became one of their greatest teachers, right? Sounds like it's similar experience for you.
Definitely. And, and you said that you were piecing yourself back together. That's, I feel like that's exactly what I went through. Oh my God, I love your coffee mug.
Oh, I got this when I was calling in my husband. So I put things like this all around so they don't see the video. So it says, "Hey, Mrs." And it has a big lipstick kiss.
So for me, the big lipstick kiss was always sort of like my sort of icon thing. So I only saw a fraction of it, but I knew exactly what it was. So that's super cool.
Yeah. So this is actually interesting. So I put things all around me. Like I'm really clear about what I'm calling into my life. And so I got this mug when I was ready to call in my spouse, and I'm in my office right now, but all over my office has my daughter's name. Her name's Chloe. She's 14 weeks old right now. And I've had her name around me for, I don't know, 5 years. And so I always put like what I get really intentional. And then I put like my house is like a 3D vision board, right? You would walk through it and you'd know, where's my focus right now? What am I calling in? What am I determined how am I determined to expand or grow my life? It's really, really around me all the time.
Okay. We're going to have to come back to that 3D vision board. because I like the
Okay.
sounds of that. But going back to, you made the comment about piecing yourself back together and the
Yeah.
different practitioners. I did a similar thing, but I had to scour the internet to find videos and freebies and anything that I could, just to try and figure out what it was that I was going through, what the problem was, and how to solve it, because there was no one answer that I could find anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it was from the challenge that I grew, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, that day was horrible, terrible, and it really sucked, but I'm grateful for it, because if I hadn't gone through it, I wouldn't be experiencing life as I am now.
Right, exactly. And those moments, it's turning your pain into your greatest teacher is like it's a very real concept. And that starts with your mindset, obviously, which you also focus on. It's our main through line. We focus on mindset, and what you believe, what you're putting your focus on is what you're going to create, right? So for me personally, it sounds like you too. I kept putting my focus on, not being. I didn't know in the moment that I was doing it, but I definitely was putting my focus on. This is hard. Life is a struggle. It never works out for me. Why can't I just be normal like my mom and my sister? Like, why can't I be normal with food like my mom and my sister? So those were the inner conversations. When what I say is the inner toxic conversation. Like if that inner conversation is toxic, then that's what you're putting out. Like that's what you're going to create in the environment around you. What you think is impacting what you feel is impacting what you think, and round and round we go. And of course, that's impacting your physical health. I mean, there's so much science based on this now, like backing this up. We think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And so if you're in this monkey mind conversation of life is hard, I can't do this, or my body betrayed me, then that is what your body hears. And all the trillions of cells that we have are going to form themselves, mold themselves to that conversation that keeps getting pushed at them.
And it's almost like we need to have those moments of crisis to show us that we are living a life of victimhood and that we have a very toxic inner voice. I call it the itty bitty shitty committee. And
I like that. That's
because
good.
it's always like nattering in your head. But unfortunately, you don't know what's going on until something major happens, and then you're sort of snapped out of it. And that's when you can go, oh, wait a sec. Like when I look back now, like you said, I didn't know that had negative thoughts. I didn't know that I could have positive thoughts. I didn't know I could talk to myself better, because when you're stuck in it, you have no idea that you're stuck in it.
Right. It becomes your baseline, right? So
Yeah.
we say that, let's say that someone has chronic fatigue, for example. Like if you've been so fatigued for so long, that becomes your new normal. And you don't realize that you even are fatigued because that's how you've lived for so long. Once you start to heal the chronic fatigue, once you start to get energy, you start to, sidestep those energy slumps, and you're like, oh my gosh, wow, I didn't even realize I could have this much energy because I haven't had it in so long. So I think when we're stuck in a certain pattern for a long time, like your brain actually gets programmed to that, and the neurotransmitters in your brain start to believe this is normal. That's where the patterning happens. And so you and I are very lucky, because what we did is we created what's called the pattern interrupt. We got in there, we interrupted the normal pattern so that we could start to have an awareness. Oh, life doesn't have to be this hard, or this can happen for me, or my body can heal. And from that pattern interrupt, the minute you have a different thought, a new neurotransmitter is happening in your brain. And then it's just continuing to have the more positive thoughts so that you can strengthen the new neural pathways.
Yeah. It starts off as, this small part of your brain that starts to develop, but it grows and it grows and it grows. It's a muscle that you have to work at. At the beginning, for me, it did take dedication and commitment to create the change because it was so drastically different than where I was. But now that's just normal. That's just how life is. I don't think twice about it.
Well, and that's the beauty of it. As long as you're consistent. So we call it in our program, the process is called the mindset shift method. And the last step of that is consistency. But, it's number one, know your why. Why is it even important to you to transform and change? What's motivating you on those days where you don't want to put in the effort anymore? What motivates you to stick it out, right? So know your why. And number two would be to get rid of the monkey mind, which we just talked about, that little voice inside of your head that's telling you all the reasons why you can't or you're not good enough. And three is be consistent. So when we have programmed ourselves to have a certain mindset, it's usually decades and decades of programming that has solidified that in our heads, right? In the way that we think. And so it would be really difficult to change that overnight. And a lot of people get really impatient with themselves. They don't have a lot of compassion with themselves. Why is this taking so long? Oh, I thought I already figured this piece out, or how did I regress back to this space? But if it took decades to get to where you are, wouldn't it make sense that you would need to consistently show up in the new way of thinking, the new way of speaking, the new way of being to be able to reprogram the grooves? Think of your brain like a record. Yes, vinyl. For those of you who remember what vinyl is.
Oh, yes.
And the needle on the record, it goes round and round and round and creates the same grooves. Well, what we want to do is we want to scratch that vinyl, right? And create different talk tracks, different grooves for that needle to go on. And that takes time. That takes consistency for sure.
It does take time. I hope it doesn't take the same amount of time to get out of it as it took to get into the problem. I think once you get it, it starts to speed up a little bit because, the thing about consistency in creating those habits and routines, I think that's what helps ground you at the beginning. It becomes something familiar that you can rely on. And for me, it was by creating a very intentional morning practice. And it's still, you still have to, you don't want to do it. You may not want to have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But you know how much it helps you. So you keep doing it. But at the beginning, every day you had to force yourself to start to create that habit because it takes time.
Yeah, we call those your AM rituals in our community. I love that you did that. So we have AM and PM rituals that we support people with to bookend the days. Like, how are you starting the day? And your AM rituals could be different than my AM rituals, right? So they're specific to the individual. Actually, our free gift on our site right now is our Own Your Rituals. It's a free gift, Own Your Rituals, and we dive into AM rituals there. And I lay out a process to help women start to form sacred rituals with themselves so that they start to really shift and change their relationship with themselves. Because if you start your day honoring, respecting, loving, adoring yourself, oh my gosh, what a different setup you're creating for yourself as you go into your day than starting rushed and tired, starting your day tired and rushed and no time for you and in an unloving, impatient, uncompassionate way. So rituals, I love that you started with yours. I think that's great.
And I think that's part of the problem is that when you fall in a bed and into the habit of everyday living and you're ruled by an alarm clock, you're not being intentional with yourself. You're not being intentional with what you want. And for me, by creating that morning routine, I was putting myself first. I'd never done that before. So I was if I did it first, then I knew it was done. And before you have a chance to have any excuses get in the way.
Right. Distracted. Yeah.
You get up and you get it done. Plus in my house, usually first thing in the morning is the quietest. So I found it easier just to get up before everybody else, do my thing, and then I could get on with my day because I'd already filled my own cup.
Right. Right. And filling, and like from that place, instead of giving to people from a half filled cup, if you hadn't taken care of yourself, it's like, let's give to our kids or grandkids or spouses or friends or clients. Let's give from the saucer that the cup sits on, because the cup has become so full from self-care and self-love and health on all levels that it overflows into the saucer. So our cup is full and we can give from the saucer itself. Right.
So, what are a couple of things that somebody could do in the morning and in the evening that could help start their AM PM routines?
Yeah, well, we map out a 3-step process in Own Your Rituals, and we go into it, but definitely setting a sacred space is really important. You know, creating that space for yourself where it's also where you can build your energy there. And so what happens in our brain is that as we create rituals, then our brain also knows associations. So if we go to the same meditation pillow or prayer pillow, if we go to the same space in the house that we have made beautiful and it speaks to us on a sacred level, the minute you go to that place, something flips in your brain. Like it's time for me now. Right? It's a perfect example. And your brain starts to associate those rituals with a certain result. So set a sacred space. In our Own Your Rituals gift, what we do is we give you a visualization and a relaxation process that helps you let go of what's not serving you in that moment. And then we also do a journaling process. And all of this can take place in like 10 minutes. You know, it's not like it has to be an hour or 2 hours, but what that does every morning is it puts you in touch with yourself. It also puts you in touch with, how do I want to go into my day? What results do I want to create? Not from so much a doing, but more of a being. Who do I want to be for myself today? Who do I want to be for others today? And from that place, this process that we have, which is actually quite quick, it becomes something that's really, it's really special. It's really sweet. It's special. And I think what happens we work with women. I think and this happens for men too, but I think what happens for a lot of women is we feel like self-care time has to take a long time. And so we say, oh, we'll get to it later, or I don't have time for that now, or, you know, I'll get to it once I take care of the kids. And like you said, usually there's a distraction that's going to find its way, right? It's really easy to get distracted before you get to that time, or that, you know, that self-care time. And so making sure you do it first thing in the morning so that you fill your cup, and no matter what the distractions are that happen the rest of the day, because they will happen. And you know that you've already grounded yourself. We call it our non-negotiables, or to create that baseline. So knowing what your non-negotiables are every day and doing those first, like my non-negotiables are to get, you know, 7 or 8 hours of sleep. My non-negotiables are to get exercise in the morning. My non-negotiables are to have quiet time, prayer, meditation for myself. Non-negotiables, have a good protein breakfast. Like these are some of my non-negotiables that are just who I am now. And when I start my day with those, it doesn't matter if my kid gets sick and I have to pick him up early from school, or if the car breaks down and you know, I missed an appointment or whatever. Like I've already taken care of myself in the morning, first thing. And by doing that, I feel like we're giving to everybody else around us. Self-care is not selfish. I think that not taking care of ourselves is actually selfish, because then our children only get part of us. Our spouse, our friends, our clients only get the part of us that can show up. But if you haven't taken care of yourself, it's not going to be all of you.
No, and definitely for myself, I sort of thought self-care was, oh, that's when you go get a pedicure. Oh, that's when you go and have lunch with a friend. So things like that, you don't have time for those necessarily if you've got young kids at home because you're too busy running around doing everything else and being mom and being a wife and all of those good things that come along with that. Um, so I didn't even understand what self-care was.
Mm,
So yeah, I was absolutely depleted and frazzled and angry at everybody for no
mm,
good reason, just
mhm,
because I hadn't been taking care of myself.
mhm,
Now that I do have a very strong routine, when those life events come up, I find that I can look at them, a little bit more objectionably and sort of say, okay, why is this happening? What is the universe trying to tell me?
yeah,
You get a little bit more curious about yourself and you can have, perspective when it comes to looking at these life challenges. It's not to say that I don't get stressed or frazzled or anything like that, but it's nowhere near like what it used to be.
that's great. That's progress, right? And sometimes progress isn't like full on fireworks. Progress happens over time. So, baby steps still lead to the top. So let's stay in some type of positive, intentional action every day. Those add up. 1% of positive action a day, I mean, that adds up really quickly. That's 7% by the end of a week. That's 30% by the end of a month. I mean, 1% a day adds up quickly.
And that's it, is I'm all about the baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
you know Often when we can look at starting a morning routine or just starting an exercise routine, it looks like this big humongous task that we have to undertake,
Mm-hmm.
and the overwhelm is what stops a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we talk about a lot here is baby steps. What's just that first little step that I
Mm-hmm.
can take tomorrow to start creating that 1%? What would be that one little thing that you would suggest to somebody to do tomorrow?
Yeah, well, so I think we've had some really great suggestions here already. I would start with some AM rituals, and you guys can go get the free gift and just have it mapped out. Like use it as a blueprint, take what works for you, leave the rest. That's cool. The other thing that's really good, and I don't have one on my desk right now, but put a rubber band on your wrist. And every time you catch yourself having a negative thought, and this isn't new, I didn't create this, but it's powerful. Every time you catch yourself having a negative thought, snap that rubber band, immediately replace it with a positive thought. And it sounds simple, but sometimes the things that can transform us sound simple, but it doesn't mean that they're always easy. And I've had numerous clients say, "Oh my gosh, the rubber band exercise! I I didn't realize how negative I was thinking. And oh my gosh, I have a welt on my wrist." They kid, I have a welt on my
I was
wrist.
I
I've
was
been snapping
picturing
so
some
much.
some people with like raw and bleeding wrists from snapping. I mean, some people, if we honestly did do it that often, for those 50, 60, 70,000 thoughts we have a day, I, I think
Yeah.
I think our wrists would look a little a little painful.
Yeah, yeah, really. But what happens, it's really interesting. What often happens is if you stick it out, then again, this doesn't happen overnight. You might need that rubber band for a week. You might need it for a month. We don't know. It's dependent on the individual. But you start to realize, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that my perspective of the world is glass half empty versus half full, right? You start to catch yourself mid snap. And then you start to catch yourself before you even need to snap. And then you start to realize, like, wow, I'm not really needing to snap this rubber band anymore. I have worked on shifting and reprogramming my thinking so much that the glass half full is now becoming my new perspective. And so we call it turnarounds. So when you snap that rubber band, you turn around that negative thought into a positive thought. Like, for example, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's so much traffic. I'm sick and tired of this traffic. You're sitting in traffic. Snap. Okay, I know there's a lot of traffic here, but I'm grateful. It's giving me an opportunity to listen to the rest of this podcast. right? So find something to be grateful for in that moment about that situation. And if you get anything to be grateful for in regards to that situation, find something to be grateful for, period, right? Because grateful, it creates a different chemistry in the brain than being really frustrated or anxious or stressed. So to be grateful for something is going to start to shift a different chemical reaction within you, which can then help lead to the next grateful thought.
Now, earlier, you mentioned a 3D vision board.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering if you can give us a couple of little tips on how to create it. I mean, a lot of us know what a vision board is, and I can kind of guess what a 3D vision board is, but how have you used that to enhance your environment?
Oh my goodness. So if you walked into my house, like I'm just thinking of one of my best girlfriends, she would be like, oh yeah. So I'm just looking around my room right now. I have my daughter's name years before my daughter was even born. I have her name up on my wall in just twice. I can see it from where I'm sitting right now. So I called her in. She was constantly at the forefront of my mind. I was constantly aligning myself to bringing a daughter into the world. I have a pregnancy, my positive pregnancy stick. You guys are going to crack up. From my first son, I could see it every day. It was there, right? It was in front of me. I knew my body could do this. I got to reinvent myself along the way. We had a very long fertility journey. So I have a 6-year-old son, and then I have twins that are 14 weeks old right now. And so it was a very long fertility journey between the two, right? The two births. And so I was constantly realigning myself to what is it I'm committed to. I'm writing my first real book right now. I have a picture right there. I can see it. I have a picture of my book mentor looking at me right above my computer. And it's like, okay, did you write today? Like she's sitting there. She's reminding me in that picture that I get to show up and I get to follow through on what I'm committed to, right? So you'll see it in my son's room, my older son's room. He has this massive picture on his wall that says, "You are so loved." And I did that intentionally because I want him to never question if he's loved, ever. I never want him to question that, right? So I surround him with things and messages. We have the messages that are going to always move him forward. We have another sign that says, "Do something amazing today." And that's right above where we go from our bedrooms down to the downstairs. It's like what we see, do something amazing today. We see it first thing in the morning, right? So we have these all over my house, probably much to my son and husband's dismay sometimes. I decorate my husband's side of the bathroom mirror with things that I want him to focus on. And I just put it in his environment, right? So it's in the peripheral of his consciousness. And yeah, it's all over our house. My husband would even share with you. He actually laughs at it sometimes. Like we have a big bathroom mirror, and it's like, it's decorated with all these things that I'm committed that our family gets to call in, right?
I used to use, I haven't done it in this house, but where we lived last year, I used to take dry erase markers and write things on the mirror.
Yeah, that's good. Or lipstick. Yeah, that's good.
Or, I mean, when we were both leave for the day, when we actually could leave the house, if you were the first in the shower, you kind of leave like a little love note on the mirror for them or something like that.
That's super cool. I love that.
We used to do that occasionally. Now, you mentioned the free gift on your website. Is that the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, that's a great first place, especially based on this conversation around rituals. I think it's a great first place to start. Own Your Rituals is there as our free gift right now. And I would love for everybody to go and receive that gift. I think it's really, really pertinent to the conversation that we had today and the work that we're doing. And then coming up is our Believe event, which is our 3-day event for women. I truly believe it's our 6th annual, and I truly believe that this is the event for women who are ready to transform their lives. And this year it's super easy. It's in studio this year. So you save money on travel and hotels and all that. there's absolutely no reason not to attend. But the Believe event, countless women, we've put thousands of women through it, and countless women have said there was life for them before the Believe event, and then there was life for them after the Believe event, where they shifted how they thought about themselves, like who they are as a woman they respect in the world, what kind of life do they want to create, and the fact that they can do it. And they left with tools and a roadmap to make those shifts happen. And we've had women come out of the Believe event, and I'm thinking of one woman, she literally doubled her salary within a week. She was a therapist, and she's a therapist at Google, and she had private clients on the side. She doubled her salary in a week. We've had women who have healed their marriages and saved their marriages coming out of the Believe event. We've had women who, I'm thinking of another woman, she was in her 70s, and she made a brave declaration she was widowed. She made a brave declaration to find love again. She had never been online dating or anything like that. I mean, it was out of her comfort zone for her generation. And she made a declaration to do it by the end of the year. She figured out online dating. She met Keith, and they were engaged before the end of the year, and they got married at month 13. They didn't get a year because something happened with her daughter being able to attend or something. But I mean, like, amazing things come out of the Believe event, amazing things. And we really focus on just pouring so much strength and love and faith into these women who are going to join us, and filling your toolboxes with all the tools that you need to take your life for you to step into your potential and create a life by design and not by default. And I'm so passionate about it. I'm so excited about it.
Well, I'm going to make sure that all of those links are in the show notes. So if you're looking at connecting with Kerry, make sure you check out there so you can connect. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lucy. This was such a fun. I love your crowd. I love your podcast. And it's always fun to share with a like mind. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creator.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like